Welcome to Local Control Task 25, Control Instrument Approaches, VFR Practice Approaches. An instrument approach procedure is a series of predetermined maneuvers for the orderly transfer of an aircraft under instrument flight conditions from the beginning of the initial approach to the landing or to the point from which the landing may be made visually. It is prescribed or approved for a specific airport by competent authority, which is the FAA. Now, there's different parts of the instrument approach procedure. There's the initial approach, which is a segment between the initial approach fix and the intermediate fix, or the point where the aircraft is established on the intermediate course or final approach course. The intermediate approach is a segment between the intermediate fix or point and the final approach fix. The final approach is a segment between the final approach fix or point and the runway, airport, or missed approach point. The missed approach is a segment between the missed approach point or the point of arrival at decision height and the missed approach fix at a prescribed altitude. The missed approach is a maneuver conducted by a pilot when an instrument approach cannot be completed to a landing. The route of flight and altitude are shown on the instrument approach procedure chart. A pilot executing a missed approach prior to the missed approach point must continue along the final approach until the missed approach point. What that means is if an aircraft decides to execute a missed approach, they can't just turn out however they want. They have to continue down final and continue all the way down till they get to the missed approach point before they can execute a turnout for another arrival. And we'll show that here in a minute. So what you see here is the high ILS or localizer DME for runway 23 left at Edwards. So we're going to identify some things on this approach plate. You're going to see the initial, the intermediate, and the final approach, as well as the missed approach fixes. I've highlighted them or circled them in red. You can see in the upper right hand corner the IAF or initial approach fix is cools. Then you can follow that down to suffix, and then to dash, and then grease is your missed approach point. So if an aircraft decided that when they got to dash that they're going to execute a missed approach, they have to continue down final until they get to grease before they can make a turnout, unless they request additionally with air traffic control to make a turn earlier than normal. However, air traffic control is going to plan on them going all the way to grease. You also have the missed approach procedure in the upper right hand corner, highlighted in orange, and it tells you exactly how the aircraft is going to execute or should execute the missed approach point. You can also see altitude requirements. You can see the one on the top right, that's going to give you the altitude point for cools. And then if you look down the bottom, you'll see the whole flight path over each point along the flight plan or the flight route. And you can see there's a line below the number. That means that they must be at or above 11,000 feet over cools in order to receive the appropriate information and guidance. Again, as they descend down final, they have to be above 5,900 over suffix. And then over dash, they had to be above 4,100. It's important to note that if an aircraft at Edwards is going to conduct a south reentry, and you notice that as they get a beam, lake bed runway 30 left, or somewhere in mid-lake bed, they start to descend to 4,100 and are maintaining that altitude, that if they have not requested so already, their plan is to go out to the TACAN and go over dash and fly the practice instrument approach for runway 23 left. And they're going to intersect dash at or above 4,100. So it's a good indication for us if we notice them at the altitude that either they should request it or we need to prompt and ask the question, are you going out to the TACAN? Because they should have let us know already, but that's probably their intention. You can also see in the green sections is the frequencies. You have the ATIS, the sport approach control, tower, ground, and then you also have the Edwards channel that they can pick up so they can get the TACAN for their approach. On the top section, you have the landing runway, and so this is going to be runway 23 left. You have the exact distance that's on that runway, how long the runway is, the touchdown zone, and then the airport elevation that they can expect. All pertinent information. You've also noticed there's a ton of other information on the approach plate, and guidance to figure out how to read all of these things can be found in the IFR SUP. So the priority afforded to VFR practice approaches at military airfields, except for military aircraft operating at military airfields, ensure that neither VFR nor IFR practice approaches disrupt the flow of other arriving or departing IFR or VFR traffic. Authorize, withdraw authorization, or refuse to authorize practice approaches at traffic conditions or as traffic conditions require. Normal approaches to progress should not be terminated. What this really means is that if you're at an airfield, non-military, and an aircraft wants to do practice approaches, we should not necessarily delay them. For example, if you have an aircraft at the approach and downwind, and you have an aircraft that's ready for departure, you wouldn't necessarily extend that aircraft or delay them excessively just so you can get a departure out, even though the departures have priority over practice approaches. The priority afforded to other aircraft over practice instrument approaches is not intended to be so rigidly applied that it causes grossly inefficient application of the services. Again, we need to control traffic with good flow in mind to provide good customer service. So wake turbulence, how does that apply for VFR practice approaches? VFR aircraft practicing instrument approaches at the approach control's primary airport must provide IFR separation. The primary airport is the airport from which the approach control services is provided. So what that means is that at some airports, you're going to be required to provide IFR separation for aircraft that are doing a practice IFR approach but are flying under VFR conditions. However, at Edwards, being in our Class D that we have, aircraft are required to maintain separation at all times. So it's their job for separation, not our job for IFR separation. So it does not apply at Edwards, but it does apply at other airfields. So let's look at this a little more in depth. Instrument landing system, an ILS, it's a 3D type approach, which means you're going to get both vertical and horizontal guidance to land. They're going to use that with the glide slope that's at the approach end of the runway, and at the departure end with a localizer. The glide slope is going to do flight path, which is going to be altitude, and then the localizer is going to provide horizontal guidance, so left and right. The ILS is a widely used instrument approach procedure and is available at all major and many medium-sized airports. When flying an ILS approach, the pilots are presented with a localizer and the glide path indications on the instruments in the cockpit. This allows a pilot to make a smooth and stabilized approach towards the runway while making precise corrections for any deviations along the way. However, if aircraft can't utilize all of that, they can just do a localizer approach, which is a 2D approach. It means they're only going to get horizontal guidance, not vertical guidance. They can also use the VOR, which means they're just going to be connecting different intersections upon the flight path, and they're not necessarily going to get the localizer or glide slope effect for them. We have all these type of approaches at Edwards. So now we're going to get into an RNAV or GPS type of approach. An RNAV or aerial navigation is a broad term that encompasses all types of point-to-point navigation and acts as an umbrella term for those type of approaches listed. Area navigation does not require pilots to fly directly over navigational aids, which means that often a more efficient point-to-point route can be selected. And so basically, you can kind of see here, the one on the right is the high ILS that we already looked at previously. It has a very straight approach. You have to fly over those points, come down final at set rates over set points, continuing all the way down final, all the way from cools. However, in a GPS or RNAV approach, you can look, there's different navigational aids. So the ones for the high ILS, you can see they have cools, they have SEPIX, and they have dash, where there's several different ones. None of those same ones exist for the GPS approach. So an aircraft can go all the way out to the top right where you have sonics, or they can do stealth from the south. From the north, they can get X-plane, or they can go directly to Kirk for their final approach fix. If you look over here at the bottom in the blue highlighted circle, you'll see Kirk, and their altitude is at or above 4,500. Again, at Edwards, if you see an aircraft on a south reentry, and they're climbed up to 4,500 on a south reentry at any point along their downwind section, their intent is probably to go out to the TACAN to pick that to pick up the GPS approach to runway 23 left. Again, it's going to be a practice maneuver. They should request to go out the TACAN, but if we notice it, that's a good indication for us that they intend to go out that far. If you'd like further references Most of the references I got for this slide were all from these places, as well as the .65 and the aim. You can follow these links and get additional information if you'd like. Thanks for joining us, and have a good day.